Chief Justice Warren Burger once wrote, "The obligation of our profession is to serve as healers of human conflict." Welcome to Lawyers as Healers, a podcast exploring an evolution happening inside the American legal profession. I am your host, Dave Albrechta. I am a coach, a mediator, and a recovering litigator. In this podcast, I'll explore how and why an increasing number of lawyers are moving beyond adversarial thinking to return to the obligation of our profession, which is to serve as healers of human conflict. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Lawyers as Healers. Today, I am joined by my former coworker, Jane Lutz, who worked with us for years as kind of the first point of contact for our clients in our law firm. And Jane has a background in human development and psychological services from Northwestern University. And she brought a very different lens into the legal world and different background. And I think as we learned and kind of grew together in these roles, she had a very a view of litigation through an emotional, relational experience, different than adversarial. And she's now, I love this. I'm going to share this if you don't mind. She's now focusing her time on interpersonal conflicts at home between preteen and teenage girls and their parents, which is great. And I'm just really excited to have this conversation and have it early in this process because, Jane, you just had a really unique vantage point into the human side of the legal system and the experiences clients were going through kind of in real time. So thanks again for joining me for this.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course.
Mm.
So I want to just kind of start at the beginning. First of all, when did you start working for us? It was like 2016, 17 in there.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It was definitely pre-COVID.
Yeah. We moved to Texas in 18, I think. And I had worked at least a year with you guys.
Yeah. So to kind of time machine yourself back to those early
Right.
days as much as it's possible. Just curious, like because you hadn't worked in a law firm before,
No.
and just kind of curious what it was like entering the legal world from more of a social work background.
Um, I think I probably had the same mindset that a lot of clients do coming in, thinking that I'm going to be on like Law and Order.
Yeah.
That it was going to be like exciting and like we're going to like find the smoking gun. And it was like, save the day. And quickly realized that that's not the case, similar to the client that comes in and realizes that this is not happening.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I mean, very quickly I saw that everyone was just really coming in a very similar space as to what you would do if you're coming into a therapist's office or a social worker's office of my life's in shambles and please help me fix it. Um, and just witnessing the journey that various clients went on, some were good, some weren't so good, and trying to and witnessing you guys trying to navigate how to fit in to that journey. Um, it was great, but it was also hard.
Yeah. So I didn't even really think about that comparison of your experience coming into that workplace was the same as the clients coming into it,
Mhm.
obviously different motivations, but
Right,
similar experience as far as like expectations go about what we're up to as lawyers.
right. Because if you haven't gone to law school, you haven't had any, like, big traumatic legal journeys in your life, the only, perspective that you have of a law office is what we see and what we're fed on TV. Um,
Exactly, and I that's why I was really excited to talk to you because I'm talking to a lot of lawyers and mainly lawyers have been my guests so far, and um, we're all we all drink the Kool-Aid,
Yeah, you all
and
speak the same jargon.
yeah, we speak the language. We you whatever metaphor you want to use. We're in that world, and our brains have been reprogrammed in law school, and all that stuff. And I think a lot of what I've been talking about with people is this idea that we're losing sight of the client's experience.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to forget for us to forget that um, that's how non-lawyers view the legal system. It's all they know.
Right.
Um, yeah.
They don't have the
Yeah,
diction.
so yeah, exactly. So, like, what was your when you talk about that kind of, like, disappointment, of, like, I thought it was gonna be the TV type thing, and then it wasn't. Do you recall anything about that? Like, what that was like for you, like, realizing that?
I am a conflict avoidant person, so I'm okay with it not being, um, a adversarial. That was all positive to me. Um I think the only disappointment was more seeing that the outcome's not always great. And it's the same sort of disappointment that you get from, like, a social work setting or a therapy setting of you're not going to solve every problem, that these things exist in the world, and, it's just another place of realizing that, these things happen, and you can't fix somebody if they are set on that path that they're on. It's like, I can't change that. And see, for so many of these clients, it's like working with them for 2, 3 plus years and, wrapping it up and then being like, "Well, they're not really in any better place than when we started so many years ago, maybe worse." And hard.
Yeah. Yeah, that's another major theme of what I've been exploring with people is the trauma that the legal system creates. So someone comes in and they're traumatized by whatever happened, and then they get
More
traumatized
disappointed.
over and
Yeah.
over. Yeah, like they have to relive the trauma or go through the disappointment of not getting what they wanted or whatever, and then they come out, maybe they get a check, but mentally, emotionally, they're worse off than when they started. Yeah, so on that note, like, what stood out to you early on or it doesn't matter if it was early on, anytime in your work, because again, you're the first person people were talking to,
Mhm.
in our firm. Like, what stood out to you about their emotional state, when people were calling us? And primarily, obviously, we're talking about mostly people who were looking to sue someone because they had lost a job or whatever.
Right. Well, definitely at the very beginning when we were having, like, live phones and I was answering the calls as they were coming in, I would say at least 50% of the calls coming in, you could hear the franticness in in the caller's voice of, "I need someone to hear me. I need someone to listen to this entire story," and so many times it was like, I think I could have been better at being firm and cutting people off, but I think that's probably my, you know, psychology background of I can feel that this person just needed to speak. And, letting them tell their whole story. Sometimes they would end and I would get chewed out because I would tell them, like, this isn't really the right firm for you. Um, but sometimes you could sense just even a relief of, I just got to say this whole thing. And I'm sure they say it to anyone who will listen, but I think um, that's what stood out to me the most is just that people really wanted to be heard and not just heard from like necessarily a lawyer hearing them and like picking apart and analyzing and trying to find the little detail that works, like the bullet point that like fits this, certain criteria that we need for a case. But just someone to sit and listen and like take in their whole story. Um, because I think when for any client, whether it's, job related or heavier than that, it's a burden to carry that. Um, and they do. They just relive it every single day over and over and over. Um and so yeah, I think that was like the biggest thing that stood out to me on intake was just I need someone to like be on my side, to hear me and process this with me. Um and like I said, sometimes it was like, and then I'll attack you. 'Cause you don't have the answer.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's kind of yeah, I mean, it's kind of where most of the clients are at. They're looking to lash out at somebody, and sometimes that turns out to be us,
Yeah,
whether it's you or the lawyer. I mean, it
yeah.
was there's kind of a that's kind of built in to that mindset of what people are really expecting or looking for.
Mhm.
Um, well, I'll say you said something early in that about not sure if you should have cut people off or it could have been better. Um, I think that's why you were so good at this job. Is that I mean, you were. I mean, people loved you, and I think it gave them faith in us as lawyers that we had someone. Our firm just immediately listened to people.
Mhm.
Whether we could help or not. Um, so. Uh, Yeah, so that's kind of the state people are in. I think that's right. Really wanting to tell a story first and foremost. And then what did you notice in that like early phase about what people expected or wanted or, what they were looking for?
I think everybody expects, and we've talked about this before, they expect you as the attorney to be like this wizard who can take in what they've said and just like wave a wand and poof, they get their day in court and it's so exciting and everybody's rallying and you can whip out this piece of paper and be like, and here's the proof. And then the other side just will come like crawling on their hands and knees and apologize. And they're going to like wave their hands in the air and be a winner. And this is all going to happen like in 3 days. And then they'll be handed this like $40 million check and lives are changed forever. And it's like name on the paper. And I think that's what everybody wanted. And then they would also add in the caveat that it's not really about them, it's about changing the system so that, like, this doesn't happen to anybody else, but really it's about you. Good. Um, and I think the other thing too is that not nobody, I shouldn't use all-inclusive words like that, but the majority, I would say, then also, with all that being said, didn't wanna put any work in. They wanted to come in and dump this whole story, do it once, and walk away, and then, like I said, 3 days later, their court's happening, and then they're getting their check in another day, and it's done. Um, and, um, so like I said, I think for a lot of people, if they have never had a legal experience and interaction, it was just so jarring to realize this is such a slow process, and this is, um like, insanely slow, and there is so much work, and I think that was one of the other hard things to go back on, like, things that I witnessed that not so much was a disappointment, but it was just hard for me to watch was to see how hard you and Eleni worked and how much hours went into this, especially when we were doing contingent fees, that it wasn't like, people don't realize how much time that goes in. That they think
Yeah.
they can just tell this story once and, AI generates what the, solution is, and then it's done, but it's like, no, we're talking about hours and hours and hours of picking through deposition papers and everything. And then when you go to the client and say, "Hey, I need you to go find this bank statement," and to have to, like, then, ask them 3 and 4 and 5 times, that was frustrating. For them to not wanna get in the court with us of, like, I'm gonna put in just as much work.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack here. I mean, the time is a massive thing here. Like,
Mhm.
very few people understand how long it takes. We live in this instant gratification
Yes.
society and culture, and so people would really, like, call and feel like have an initial consultation, and, like, their first question is like, "So when's my check coming?"
Yeah, "How much is
And
this
we
worth?"
haven't even
Yeah.
yeah, we haven't even done anything yet, let alone, like, sign an agreement, and so, yeah, that's a huge piece of this, and then, um, what you're starting to talk about there at the end is this, I've talked a lot and I'm talking to a lot of lawyers about lawyer burnout and what causes lawyers to burn out in this job. But there's this other thing that happens in every case that I think we experience a lot of, which is like client burnout, where they come in and they're all amped up and excited, and their engagement, again, not always, but often, kind of falls off as the months and years go by.
Right.
And so I'm wondering, from your perspective, especially with the social work background, like what your notice or what you noticed about clients' engagement, and why you think that happens, how it happens, and just what you saw. Because you were speaking this a little bit at the end, like you're the one that had to, I'm like looking through prepping for deposition. I'm like, okay, I need these 4 things. We didn't get this yet. Can you work with the client to get these things? And so you're the one having to like hound them, like, hey, we need this now,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden they're not so interested in putting the time in. So just curious what you noticed there.
Um, I think when I was kind of thinking through all of this, um, I and this is kind of where you've arrived is, um, there's not enough client continual engagement. Um, to maintain a caseload that pays the bills, you have to be constantly meeting people and constantly intaking new clients and taking on new cases. And by doing that, you're we would not speak to people for 6 to 8 months at a time, sometimes a year, and I was very shocked by that. Um, and so it's like this person has come in and shared the most traumatic one of the most traumatic moments of their lives with you, and they've probably hit rock bottom in some way because their career's fallen apart. It's got to take a toll on their family, on their interpersonal relationships, on their finances. And they think they've come here for a solution, and we're trying to get there, but then we don't speak to them for 6 or 8 months. And so this person has sort of been left wallowing in, and some people will check in and some people won't, because I think there's also a little bit of shame and embarrassment there of, hearing their employers told them that they're the worst, and, or this terrible thing has happened, um and then all of a sudden out of nowhere it's like, okay, we need this, we need this, we need this. And I think I just don't think there's enough balance, and I'm not saying this like you or
Yeah.
an
I,
attack in any way. I just don't think it's not possible. There's not enough hours in the
yeah.
day, right, to like to meet to maintain all of the cases and still then also incorporate like a check-in with everybody and just be like, "Hey, I just want to know how you're doing." Because then you also have to bill for that, and it's like, well, that sucks, know? Um, so I think that's where a lot of the burnout comes from is this quasi personal relationship where it's like we're dealing with the most shameful, hurtful parts of my life, and it really sucks, and every time I talk to you, I feel worse because I'm talking about these things that I don't wanna talk about, or I'm reading a document that the employer has provided that says, "This is why I was fired, and this is why it wasn't legal," and I have to, like, come up with reasons why that's not true, and then I have to go run around and find at least for me, like, it's stressful to find, like, W-2s and bank statements because I don't really wanna look at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, yeah, I can see why in a client's eyes, it's like, "What's the point of this?" Like, I or like, "I've got the rest of my life going on. I don't wanna drop everything and talk to you just because I haven't heard from you in 8 months." Um
That's such a good point, and I often, even just talking with you, forget about a lot of this stuff, and but I don't know, honestly, because I haven't practiced a lot of other areas, if that's common, like in personal injury cases, or, I think divorce cases are a little more active right away. Um, a lot of this is a product of employment law, in that we had this agency phase right at the beginning, which is intended to slow cases down and does, that would create this 6 to 8 month window where, you file the stuff and then you just sit there and wait for your right to sue letter. Um, and then all of a sudden there's this big burst of energy at the end where we're like, all right, we got to file the case. And,
We need it
and
all, yeah.
yeah, and it is confusing for people, no matter how many times you explain this is how it's going to go. Um, and I'll ask you about that, because one of the things you and I worked on a lot, especially towards the end, is kind of client communication and
Mhm.
early those early meetings, and like, because I think we were running into that where it just seemed like people didn't understand what they were signing up for.
Right.
Even though I would explain it multiple times. Um, and maybe this kind of gets back to this idea of people, their expectations are different or whatever. But wondering what you think about that in terms of like the state that people are in when they come in for the initial consultation and those early meetings, and why they're not able to, or they don't want to, or whatever, to absorb all this information, like drinking from a fire hose,
Right, yeah.
Um,
I think we've talked about this a little before is I think it's important to remember when a client first comes in, I think they're in fight or flight mode. They're they're talking about these, you know, horrific moments of their life. And just like, when you're in a therapist's office or maybe I think about like if you've ever been pulled over by the police or had some sort of legal interaction like that, you kind of forget what happened because you were just like so running on adrenaline. And I think it's very similar. They're flooded with emotions, they're flooded with memories. They only have 1 hour of your time, and they're trying to spit out as much information as they possibly can because they think in this 1 hour they have to prove their case. And so they're trying to think of remembering every single moment that could possibly sway you onto their side. Um, and then you're left with like 10 minutes to like
yeah,
summarize that they do have a case or they don't have a case and this is what we're going to do. And so yeah, I think a lot of times in that quick moment they don't hear anything that actually happened. Um and I think it's not even just the initial consultation. I think that a lot of the clients were like that the first 2 or 3 times that we would speak to them because they
yeah,
still are just in that mode of like I've got to prove to you that I'm right.
yeah,
Um And I think when you're thinking like that, you're not again, I think that puts a person in that fight or flight mode, and I don't think they're gonna listen. Um, and sometimes I think it was helpful to have a family member with them, but I think in a lot of cases it didn't help because it seemed like that family member was there just to fuel the fire, that
yeah,
and you can understand that, like, you are gonna support your spouse, or you're gonna support your parent or child, um, but Yeah, I don't think it usually hit until about the 4th or 5th conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, one and I that's reminding me, like, one of the things we started doing was having both of us sit in on consultations, I think for a lot of those reasons. I mean, A, you were able to help me check in on that human relation side,
Yeah,
in terms of, like, who is this person and what are they dealing with and their trauma and all of this stuff.
because you were listening for the legal things, whereas I was sort of listening like, where do I hear this person kind of falling? Does it sound like they have substance abuse issues? Does it sound like they have, some personality, maybe spectrum disorders or um
Yeah, and I think, like, this is a note for, any lawyers who are listening to this, and, one of the things that's coming up a lot are, like, skeptical lawyers who hear me talking about this stuff. Um, I know my one of my responses early on was like, "Well, I'm not a psychologist or a social worker. I shouldn't be and can't be focusing on that stuff. Like, I don't have the brain space to do both." And this is getting into like, okay, so what are we supposed to do with all of this? Having someone like you in the room it was amazing because it allowed you really need 2 brains
Right.
to process all the stuff that's coming in, lawyer brain to really analyze facts and case law and analysis, and your brain to help just see the person, and it's really a kind of a testament to, like, it is hard to do this all on your own,
It is.
and maybe if you were trying to do it all on your own, you would need a 2.5 hour consult,
Well,
to, split it up. So, um, I wonder from your perspective, watching Lenny and I do this work and seeing other lawyers we were interacting with, um, kind of like what do lawyers, misunderstand or get wrong about people in conflict and people that are coming to us for help? Like, what's the legal system missing?
um, it was funny, I was thinking about this, uh, last night, and, I have gone to therapy, with a family member, and, we have we were arguing over something. I'm trying to
Yeah.
keep this as generic as
Yeah, yeah.
possible, and, um, there was no way that either one was going to agree with the other person, and we went into therapy. And the point of the therapy session was not to turn the other one into a robot and just automatically agree with the other person. The point of the therapy session was to find a way to talk about the argument in a way that was healthy and come up with some solutions as to how we're going to have future arguments. We are family members. um, how we can have those arguments in the future and not hurt each other's feelings and have it be a more conductive or productive argument. Um, and I think that really relates to law, especially employment law, because you're never going to convince the employer that they did something that was illegal. You're never going to convince the employer that they need to issue this big apology letter, or that suddenly there is now this like bubble that sits above this company that anyone who walks in there will never be sexually assaulted or will never be paid less than their earned wage or whatever it is. It's just not going to happen, and the employee is never going to sit there and be like, you know what, you were right, I really was a shitty employee. I didn't do my
Yeah.
job.
Yeah.
And so I think the and this is kind of where you guys got to, is the place of like, there is no solution to this.
Yeah.
That yes, there may have been a law that was broken, but we're never going to come to the end of this anybody's going to feel like we reached like a solution.
Yeah.
Um, and so the focus needs to be on how can we just sort of move forward with this? And I think that's kind of where you guys were getting, but I think that needs to be made more clear to the client of just like you're not going to go to therapy and the goal is going to be whoever, you're going to therapy about, whatever relationship that is, you're going to bring that other person in there and they're going to fix it. The point of therapy is to sit and think about different ways to process it or, different ways to go out in the world and avoid those feelings coming up, you know, react with different actions to create different results. Um, I think that really needs to be more strongly incorporated. I mean, there's certainly a need for law. There's a need for you need to follow the law and there's consequences if you don't. But the piece that needs to be removed is the idea that it's going to solve everything.
Yeah. The analogy of at the beginning of people thinking that we're wizards and then just wave a wand and everything is fixed or how they
Yeah.
want it to be it really gets to the root of that. Like people really believe that this
Yeah.
system that justice means that.
Right. That at the end of the day, someone will say, "You're right, they're wrong, and here's a check."
Yeah. Yep. Which is, I suppose you could probably connect that to people's view of, the TV movie idea of the justice system, which
Mhm.
makes it appear that way. That
Right.
you go hire a lawyer and within a couple weeks you're in court in front of a jury and a judge, and the judge, there's this magical moment where the judge is like, "You're right, they're wrong, they're terrible,
Mhm.
maximum penalties, maximum damages," you know,
Let's walk out in
um,
a crowd of people, like,
yeah, that's yeah,
cheering you on.
crowd
Yeah.
surf out of there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it just doesn't work that way. And not only does the justice system not work that way, human conflict doesn't work that way. Like even if it wasn't in the system, like you're explaining your interpersonal conflict, you can't make another side agree with you.
No.
It just doesn't happen that way. And that's what the legal system. It's funny because that's how I felt as a lawyer, is like trying um that was my job, was to like beat up the other side so much that they would cave. And
Right.
and it was crazy. I don't know if you had this experience, but like, when we had, cases fall on a spectrum, some were better than others.
Mhm.
And some of our best cases where the evidence was just right there, black and
Yeah.
white,
You
our
couldn't see it
client's
another
not
way.
lying.
Yeah.
There's no other way. They would always come up with another way to see
Yeah.
it, even if it was just out of thin air. Um,
Right.
and those cases really a lot of times for me were the ones that were like, wow, what are we doing here? um, kind of giving false hope to the client that somehow are going to change their minds, or what are we even arguing about? Because now we're just arguing about made up stuff. um, that was always really difficult for me. Uh,
Yeah. Well, and then, to add on to that, what was really difficult was with a lot of those clients was then witnessing everything else kind of falling apart in their life. Sometimes we would have those, you pair that with also then you hear about, okay, they came in initially with this person and then they broke up with this person and now they're with another person. They're kind of like snowballing through relationships, or they got a new job, but then they got fired and now they've onto another job. And you can see that all of this points to the fact that there's there's something wrong, whether
yeah,
it's
yeah,
intrinsically in that person or if it's just that their life is spiraling because they haven't addressed what's really, at the root of it. And I think that was the harder thing, was witnessing that spiral, or even if it did resolve, seeing that they still don't have their shit together. You know,
Yeah.
like, oh, you maybe you got, like, some money back out of this, but it was like, okay, you're still nowhere better.
Yeah.
Um,
At what cost? Yeah.
at what cost?
Yeah.
Um, and it always kind of felt like to me, like, oh, not that the money they spent on hiring you wasn't worth it, but it was always like, well, you could have taken that money and gotten a master's, you know?
Yeah.
You could have gone
Uh-huh.
back to community college and gotten a master's degree, and, you know, if this is all about getting paid more, then, like, go get some qualifications and get paid more.
Yeah.
Or, you know, if this is all about how you didn't have time to be with your kids, then it's like, okay, then now just be home with your kids and appreciate that.
Yeah. 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 This gets to a really big point about um two things. One is what the legal system can provide, which is
Mhm.
very, very, very limited. It's
Right.
money, it can provide money. Um, and versus like what clients really want, um, whether they know it or not, right?
Mhm.
And like what actually helps them improve and move on and contribute how they want to contribute, because that's what a lot of people would talk about, like when someone says, I just want this to never happen to someone again.
Mhm.
um they're talking, what that really to me is a kind of a personal value statement of like, I want to make the world a better place.
Mhm.
That's something that's important to me. And what lawyers aren't capable of doing, because we're not trained in this way, is saying, well, what are some other ways you could contribute that would help you feel like you're making a difference that isn't suing someone?
Right.
There's other things you can go out and do that will check these boxes, that isn't spending 3 to 4 years of your life in litigation, uh,
Fighting. Right.
fighting, spending money, all the things that come along with it. And again, sometimes it's necessary, sometimes that is what people need, but it's not a one size fits all. And as lawyers, we're not trained or willing or able to have those conversations. We're not good at it, because we're just like, well, this is what we do. This is the way, and sign here, and get you in the pipeline.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then to your other point, uh, since I've made this transition and been presenting these other options to clients, um, it's amazing how difficult it is to sell to people.
It is.
So like what I wanted to bring this back around too. You said earlier, we had all kinds of conversations about this in the past of like, I oftentimes felt like I was spending my days just getting sales pitches from people. Um, they're just trying to sell their case because they want a lawyer to take it, and so you kind of get the best version of their case, and you get the best version of them in that initial meeting. They're on their best behavior. They're putting on the show, to a degree, because they want you to say yes. And that system is about us taking on their stuff and being their crusader and going out and doing the work for them.
Right.
And when you present these other options of like, well, how about, would you be interested in like taking some time and reflecting, doing some inner work, thinking about what you really want in life and what your role was in this and what you can learn from and growing and all of that stuff. That is 100% work they have to do. That's hard work. It's not
It is.
easy being vulnerable and like opening up yourself to that kind of stuff. And people would much rather fork out a bunch of money to have someone go fight their case for them than spend a quarter of that amount and just kind of get some inner peace. But it's because they have to do it all themselves.
Yeah.
Um, so I wanted to comment on that.
It would be I think it would be fascinating, and I know you kind of were headed to this way. If you could open up like a multi-team clinic where you came in for a consultation with an attorney, but then it followed in, and then you also went into a consultation with a therapist, and then you also went in for a consultation with like a doctor, a health,
Yeah.
health person, and then also, met with like a physical trainer.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
all of those people worked together to sort of build this comprehensive health plan.
Yeah. Yeah. That is, I mean, that is integrative law.
But, like, there's no place where all of those things exist, and to leave it on the client and say that, like, you will follow through and do these things, they won't, because, again, it comes back to this idea of, like, that takes looking in the mirror, that takes work, and I'm not ready to do that. All I'm ready to do is say my story and have someone support me. And you telling me that I have to do some work for myself, you're not supporting me because you're pointing to the idea that, like, some of it has to do with me.
Yeah, and the big part of this is just that how conditioned we are all to believe that if something goes wrong, the legal system's there to fix it. There's just this like intense societal conditioning that like
You're the
you get
catch-all.
hurt, you call a lawyer, you get paid for it, you
Mhm.
know? And so why would I have to look at myself in all of that? You know, that's um yeah, but I think you're 100% right. And you know, the other fascinating thing is people again uh cough up large amounts of money for legal retainers really without question, and they'll find a way to get that money pulled together if they have a lawyer that'll take their case. But if you presented them with that same cost and said, and we're putting together this comprehensive team for you to help you through this conflict, and the cost is the same, I don't know if people are as on board with,
Right,
you know, it's just an interesting thing that people are less willing, it seems, at least right now, to spend money on that type of care versus a $6,000 retainer for a lawyer, you know?
right.
Uh,
I
yeah.
still love the comment that I don't someone's husband once said to them while we were doing this, "We could take that money and go on a really cool vacation." I was like
Yeah.
it always stuck with me of like, yeah. Like, do I wanna spend $6,000 on a retainer? Or, like, if a friend came to me and was like, "Hey, I really need money for
Yeah.
this attorney. It's like $6,000." I'd be like, "Hey, can we go on this really cool, like, all-inclusive, just sit on a beach and, like, indulge in every way possible and come back completely relaxed and just let that go?" Like, that would be so
Uh-huh.
much more worth my money.
Yes. Yep. I know. I that's a great story. And um I've lately been trying to explain to clients that litigate that to I'm not a gamer, but I've played some video games in my life and know that, you know, you get this kind of little energy bar for your
Right.
character, you know, in the corner of the
Yeah.
screen. You've got this fixed amount of resources, whether it's your energy or time or finances, and where do you want to spend it? Do you want
Yeah.
to spend it like being in this space and fighting over this thing for 3 to 5 years, or like you said earlier, like a vacation or a master's degree or
Right.
retraining, or, you know, do you want to reinvest in yourself to improve your life?
Yeah.
It's a great question to pose, and I'm not sure how many lawyers do that. You know, I
Yeah.
think some do, but
And it's like a
uh,
guaranteed outcome. If you
that's
spend
right. Yeah.
$6,000 to start this master's program, that's a guaranteed outcome that in
Yeah.
whatever amount of time that you're gonna graduate. Or, that if you're gonna spend this money on a vacation, you're gonna come home with pictures and souvenirs and all these things. You spend that money on an attorney, there's no guarantee of when that ends or how it ends.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Guarantee is huge because lawyers do tell clients that, all I know for
Yeah,
sure. I can't guarantee anything, and the risks are
yeah,
huge no matter how
yeah,
good your case is. Um, Felt like for me and our career, the cases that I was sure were a slam dunk often were the ones that went sideways.
Yeah, it's all hard
um,
for
you
those.
know, yeah. So yeah, so we'll wrap up here. I mean, couple closing questions. Oh no, this has been a great conversation. We could talk. I mean, you and
Yeah,
I have had these
yeah.
conversations for hours before, so I know this could go for a long time, and I love getting your perspective on all of this stuff. Um, so what? Uh, there's kind of two things I want to end on. Kind of some more practical tips for lawyers who are maybe new to these ideas, or because I mean, you were lucky you got to, well, lucky, I don't know if lucky is the right word, but you you had front row seats for our kind of evolution and
Mhm.
transition, and uh, well, I'll leave it at those words. Um, and some lawyers may be just beginning that journey, or this might just be all completely new for them. So I'm wondering, like, from a social work background and your experience bringing that into a law firm, like, what are some, I don't know, tools or lessons, or anything from your background that you think lawyers could benefit from if they're beginning to question these things, you know?
I think the easiest way to start would just introduce the idea of just having a really basic conversation, whether it's at the beginning of a consultation or the end of a consultation or client meeting, of just focusing on how is this person doing, and turn off the lawyer brain, whether it's for, 10, 15 minutes of just walk me through how this is affecting the rest of your life. And let me just hear what else is going on, and introduce that into the conversation going forward when you talk about the risks of the case, and bring those things back up in the future and say, okay, we're going to look at another retainer, but I know before you talked to me that, you're having some issues with the marriage, or, you need to spend more time with your kids. These are the risks of the case. Consider this before you, put the next retainer down of, you know, how is the rest of your life going? And I think that's just a really good beginning step. And you don't need a degree in social work to do that. That's just humanity.
Yes, thank you for saying that. um Yeah, lawyers are I mean, I did this for years, but we're really good at making these excuses of, like, "That's outside of our lane." We
Right.
don't talk about those things here.
Yeah. And you really only have so much time in your day. You gotta make the most of that time with the client. And I know that they think that, every lawyer is just trying to get the most billable time, but I think to serve the client the best is you have to know the client, and you have to know them outside of just the paperwork they're giving you, just that one side of their story. Because if this is about fixing things, you have to know what's going on in someone's life to fix it.
Yeah, there's this, great kind of irony here of lawyers, and the law uses this phrase to make people whole again, right? Like, when we talk about damages, or whatever, we talk about wholeness, which has become a very trendy kind of spiritual term.
Right.
But, um, but uh, I think lawyers need to be actually serious about that. And, like,
Right.
if we're trying to make someone whole, you have to understand the whole person, not
Mhm.
just the facts of the case, but, like, what all do they, who is this person?
Right.
Um, and then B, what is it that would actually make them whole? Uh,
Right.
um, for some people, maybe it is just money, but I think for the majority of people, it's a lot of other stuff.
And I think you would have a client who's potentially less burnt out, um, able to see the bigger picture, less like they get so hyper focused on the pain that was inflicted upon them, that I think
Yeah.
you could also have a, you know healthier client, a more stable client if you could encourage them to sort of pursue some of those other things that could make them whole. Like if they're saying that they, want to pursue other jobs, and encourage them to get some new training, encourage them to, pick up a hobby or whatever it is. Um, you're going to have a more stable client that can show
Yeah.
up and have a real conversation and not hyper focus on like that one time Jenny made fun of them in the coffee room.
Yeah. That's right. That's exactly right. I mean, I often felt like we were spending a lot of our time trying to save people from themselves.
Yeah.
Um, and that would be the conversations in the mediation room and leading up to settlement discussions. But if you do that work early, um, and you get people to connect with what they really care about and what they want their life to look like and all these other questions, um, you don't have to quote save them. They will just they have all these answers already. They're just going to say, "Oh God, I would much rather be hanging out with my kids than
Right.
coming in and spending 3 days prepping for a deposition with you."
Right.
Um, you know, or any of the other things they have to do, and they start seeing this more clearly. And I think you're right. That makes people better clients.
Yeah.
As much as I hate that phrase.
Right. Right.
You know, but
But
lawyers love talking about client control and client management and all these things where if you just focus on them and their humanity and who they are, that all that stuff just kind of comes
it just
naturally,
comes naturally. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, well, final question, and then I'll let you go. I know we're a little over time. This podcast name, Lawyers as Healers, is a newer concept, probably the first time you'd heard it. It's not something I was using
Yeah.
when you were working with us. So I'm just wondering, I've been trying to ask most of my guests this question, but what does that phrase bring up to you or bring up for you? Or, what does it mean to you kind of after being, working in the legal system and seeing this change in our practice?
Like, I think it hits on all the things that we've talked about, is that justice isn't just one category. It has a 360 function, in our lives, and, um, that, you know, healing can come from, filing things when it's important, but, that's not always the answer. And, and I think healing can come from having a legal brain talk through something traumatic and address what falls under the category of right and wrong according to our laws, um, but then also address the person as a whole and say, that wasn't right. This kind of indicates that it broke a law, but I want to see you live your best life, and I don't think that you're going to find it by going down this road of filing a bunch of complaints, or maybe you will. Like, I think it could, I'm not saying that's always the conversation, but I think um of just looking at a person as a whole person and not just a singular category is how the healing happens.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think to that, I mean, what you're kind of saying is um, I, th- giving the clients more of a choice,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You know,
And yeah, taking out the idea of like, I just want to add you to the roster because I have a shot of making some money off of you. Um, but really sort of delve into what is this going to produce? Not just financially, but in all other ways.
yeah, this is truly good for you, helpful for you, you know,
Yeah.
and helping clients really think that through. Um, instead of just being the mill where you're just pushing people through the system. Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Well, thank you, Jane. I really appreciate you spending time with me.
Yeah.
It's just like super insightful getting uh non-lawyer perspectives on this stuff. It really
Yeah.
truly is because again, our brains are all warped and we see things differently. So it's just really refreshing to uh get that perspective. So I thank you.
Happy to do it.